Program Manager for the Local Food Purchase Assistance LFPA program here at the Agency of Agriculture. Today we're going to be talking about LFPA Plus, which is under the umbrella of the LFPA program, a funding opportunity that we have upcoming this fall that actually opens on Monday, October 30th. So we're glad you're here, and we'll just get started with a couple of norms. Today we will be doing a brief overview of the grant, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. You'll notice that Julie, I believe, just started recording, and we're potentially only gonna record the slides. So don't feel as if your faces will be recorded or your questions. We will try to write them down for folks who can't come, but we're just recording this so folks who couldn't make the webinar will have an opportunity to see the information. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. In the upper right-hand corner, you should have a camera, mic, two camera and mic buttons next to the leave option. We just ask that you keep yourself muted while we're doing the slides and while others are speaking. And you should also have along that top bar a raise hand function, which you're welcome to use if you have any questions during the presentation. Julia will be monitoring the chat, and I do ask if it's a question that can wait until the open Q&A that you might hold it. But obviously, if it's time relevant to the slide I'm on, feel free to ask. And just thanks again for joining us on this Friday afternoon. I know that's a big ask for a lot of folks. A brief agenda for the time we have today. We'll start with an overview of the LFPA program, as well as talking about the two different arms of the program that exist. And then we'll talk specifically about the LFPA Plus grant, which is the opportunity that opens on Monday. Application requirements for that, fund for that grant program, and then the process should you choose to apply. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So LFPA stands for Local Food Purchase Assistance Program. It's run by the USDA and the Agricultural Marketing Service, or AMS, and this program has awards up to $860 million for funding to states, territories, and federally recognized tribes. So we, as the Agency of Agriculture in Vermont, applied to this federal grant and were awarded. The main purpose of this grant is to maintain and improve food system supply chain resiliency through local and regional procurement and distribution. And again, here in Vermont, the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets was awarded a total of over $1 million between an initial award in 2022 and then a supplemental amendment in May of 2023. The focus in Vermont specifically is to increase food security for underserved communities through purchase of Vermont-grown foods with specific focus on socially disadvantaged producers. You'll notice that the phrases underserved communities and socially disadvantaged producers are underlined. That's because it's a federal grant, those are USDA definitions that we are using for our criteria, that we have to use for our criteria. We appreciate those are nuanced, defining terms, and we appreciate that a lot of folks that we work with and who are applying to the grant don't necessarily, we appreciate it as a nuance. Those are nuanced terms, and we are happy to adapt for folks who are applying to the program as we can while still meeting the requirements of the USDA. So a little bit more about this umbrella of LFPA. I made this diagram and then I realized it's a sideways umbrella, so I apologize for that. But the LFPA program in green here, run by the USDA and the AMS, has two different funding streams. So LFPA on the top in the light blue is funded by the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And those awards that award was received by the Agency of Agriculture in August of 2022. And you'll see that there's two ways that we have subawarded that information, that we've subawarded those funds through partnerships and also through a request for information RFA, which was a competitive grant round, just like the one upcoming, but was last year. In purple, the LFPA Plus, which is what we're talking about today. Oh, sorry, folks.
Sarah, I can see the slide that you're on.
Thank you for putting that in the chat. Both so you don't have to hear me talk twice and so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's see. I wonder, Julia, if it's because you're a presenter. Oh, this is really interesting. We've got a half and half situation going on. Sorry, folks.
Never seen this before. Sarah, maybe you could just
Teams.
try unsharing and sharing again.
Yeah. Sorry, folks. 1 second. All right. Let's see. I wonder if it's when folks came in. All right. Can folks see the slides now who couldn't see them before?
Sarah, I'm just seeing the welcome slide now.
Yep. And then now it's back to the side. The slide. Can everyone see my sideways umbrella? No. Amy, were you shaking your head? No, you can't see them. Oh,
Correct, I'm not able to.
all right. Hold tight, everyone. We're going to go rogue and share from PowerPoint.
Amy, are you seeing Sarah just stopped sharing, but were you seeing everyone's faces really large on your screen, Amy?
No, just along the top. The larger part was just the welcome slide.
Interesting. Not quite sure why. Sorry about that.
I'll share with everyone that this is I've been here for just about 6 months and this is my first webinar, so I'm chuckling because this feels right on par with technical.
Amy, if you wanted to pop, or anyone that is having trouble, if you wanted to pop your email into the chat, I can email you a copy at least as a backup.
Julia, can you see the slides now?
Yes, the opening one.
Okay. And then if I toggle, can folks see the slides changing?
It changed for me.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. I'll just do a little reset. So this was the overview slide, just talking about the agenda. And then the local food purchase definition, who the USDA and AMS awarded to all the states, territories, and federally recognized tribes. In Vermont, we've been awarded over $1 million, and our focus is increasing food security for underserved communities through purchase of Vermont grown foods, specifically focused on socially disadvantaged producers. And again, both of those underlined terms are prescribed for us by the USDA grant with definitions. All right, the umbrella. So the Green LFPA program is the umbrella program that in Vermont has two kind of separate arms that function. So LFPA on the top in the light blue was awarded in August of 2022 and to us at the Agency of Agriculture, and 2 rounds of awards went out through that funding, both in partnerships and through a competitive request for application last year. That funding has all been utilized, which is why we are now utilizing a second source of funding for LFPA plus, CCC funding, or the Commodity Credit Corporation. This is important for folks. I know we have some current grantees on the call, and we have some folks who know about current projects. The CCC funding, as you'll learn, has different spending stipulations, so we really want folks to understand that if they knew about ARPA-funded projects or have ARPA-funded projects, that this grant opportunity is going to look a little bit different than that opportunity last year. Some of this funding was utilized for emergency relief in this past summer. And the rest of it will be going to this request for application that opens on Monday for the second round of competitive funding. I apologize, there's going to be some pretty wordy slides. So the LFPA definitions that cover both of those grant funding sources. Socially disadvantaged farmer, rancher, or producer. A socially disadvantaged farmer, rancher, or producer includes a farmer, producer, or rancher who is a member of a socially disadvantaged group. A socially disadvantaged group is a group whose members have been subject to discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, age, disability, and where applicable, sex, marital status, familial status, parental status, religion, sexual orientation, genetic information, political belief, reprisal, or because all or a part of an individual's income is derived from any public assistance program. Underserved communities are defined by the USDA as those including individuals who belong to underserved communities that have been denied such treatment, such as Black, Latino, and Indigenous and Native American persons, Asian American and Pacific Islanders and other persons of color, members of religious minority, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, LGBTQ, and I would say IA plus persons, persons with disabilities, persons who live in rural areas, and persons otherwise adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequality. So those are the two parent definitions that really shape a lot of this grant. The focus of this grant is that food procurement will be focused primarily on supporting farmers, ranchers, and producers who meet this definition of socially disadvantaged, and will be serving underserved communities as they're defined here. In addition, in the state of Vermont, we are requesting that food be sourced within Vermont. Vermont, obviously, you can see here has an asterisk. Food products that are grown and processed in Vermont, or if food products are determined to be of cultural importance and are not available within the state of Vermont, grantees can potentially source these foods outside state borders if the food will not travel more than 400 miles from source to final user and is grown and produced domestically. We in Vermont appreciate it's a small state in the Northeast, and we have a diverse population who both nutritionally and culturally prefer and require a diverse diet. And we really want to work with grantees and applicants to support the communities they're working with, but we do require that that be approved by grant managers before it would be allowable. So we just ask that, you could reach out if you're considering applying with an idea of what you would like to purchase and why, and we can offer guidance on yes or no, that could be an allowable cost. And then there's more definitions for LFPA plus, because these funds can only be procured. These funds can only be utilized for food procurement. They have pretty strict stipulations on what what designates food and what can be procured. Unprocessed or minimally processed food products are products that include, as examples, fruits and vegetables, including 100% juices, grain products such as pastas and rice, meats, whole, pieced, or food items such as ground meats, meat alternatives such as beans or legumes, and fluid milk or other dairy foods such as cheese and yogurt. Foods in a wide variety of minimally processed states, for example, whole, cut, pureed, and or forms, like for example, fresh, frozen, canned, or dried, are also allowable for procurement. Processed foods, which are not eligible, include baked goods, breads, muffins, and crackers, prepackaged sandwiches or meals, other prepared and or pre-cooked items that come ready to eat or that require no further preparation beyond heating, i.e. cooked proteins, including chicken, nuggets, fish sticks, and pre-made pizzas, which, I don't know about you all, but when I read that, I chuckled that that's some like oddly very specific way to define processed foods. A note about this, I appreciate that a definition that is created out of examples is a little bit funny, but this is the language we have from the USDA. And we appreciate that there's a lot of spaces between those examples. We are happy to work with folks on specific questions around those, but these are kind of the hallmark. This is the language that we have been given by the USDA in regard to what is considered unprocessed, minimally processed, or fully processed.
Sarah, we have two quick questions in the chat,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. I'm going to start with the last one first. Does maple syrup and sugar qualify?
Great questions. Maple syrup does qualify. Processed maple syrup, so like raw sap, I don't believe would qualify. Or, for example, unpasteurized honey would not qualify, but pasteurized honey would qualify. Processed sugar, I do not believe would qualify. Eggs do qualify. And then, yeah,
And then
I think that's
yeah,
question.
thank you, Sarah. We had one, and then one other question from maybe a slide or two ago. Do we have a list of socially disadvantaged farmers or producers in Vermont?
Yeah, so part of the first round of this grant that was put out was uh, a farmer interest form. So a form was sent around to farmers in Vermont. Obviously, we probably did not reach every farmer in Vermont and producer about this is LFPA. Would you be interested in having grantees potentially reach out and purchase from you? We have had a lot of responses to that form. I think since we've also had a round of grantees, we also have all of the farms that they have had created relationships with have been purchasing from. Um, and I would say we'll probably go back and ask if they want to be added on the farmer interest form if they weren't before, but we have a pretty robust starting place for folks. We always caveat that statement with, the farmer interest form is in no way an endorsement of any of those producers or a way of saying that you should reach out to them over other producers, but we do offer a starting place for folks to be able to reach out to farms across the state.
And Sarah, maybe I'll just add on that the agency would not be making a determination if a farmer was socially disadvantaged. So on that form, there's an ability for folks to self-certify yes, no, or unsure, or decline to answer. And so we really leave it up to the grantees to determine their process of do they make an educated guess? Do they speak with each farmer and ask them to make their own determination? That's part of one of the great parts about LFPA is that there is a significant amount of state autonomy and ability for the work to be done according to what works best in the state. So we're really happy to support, but we would ultimately leave that up to the grantee to determine how they're making that determination, and can work with you if you need support on how to do that, ethically and transparently, or if you need some tweaks in the process to make sure that's done in accordance with your organization's values.
Yeah, we, for the state of Vermont, we're determined for folks to feel like this funding is accessible without diminishing or putting in question their relationships with farmers or anyone's integrity in any part of this process. So we will figure out how to make that happen. Quick facts about LFPA Plus. There's just about $400,000 of funding available through the competitive RFA. Award ranges are minimum $15,000 and maximum $60,000. There is no match requirement for this funding, so you do not need to provide any in-kind or other match when you apply. We will be asking, and you will see in the RFA, that if your project, for example, is a CSA share, and that involves home delivery, and you're requesting funds for the food procurement, we would ask that you just let us know where is the funding coming from for the mileage and the car and the personnel to deliver those shares, just so we can see that your project is complete, versus, well, I'll figure it out, but I just want the funding first for the food, and then I'll figure out mileage. We would really rather see a complete proposal of which food procurement will be part and would be funded by LFPA plus. Applications will be open this coming Monday, October 30th, and they will be closing on December 12th at 2 p.m. It's very important. It is not midnight or end of day, 2 p.m. on December 12th. Award notification will be by the end of February 2024. And implementation will begin for the proposals that are awarded as soon as their grant agreements have been written and signed, which will be probably February, if not March of 2024, and projects will run through March of 2025. A caveat is that, projects don't need to run the entire length of that implementation period. We appreciate, I think it would be different for a project to be like in 2 months of the implementation period, whereas we understand, again, if it's my perennial example, a CSA share, that like those often wrap up in November, and that's fine, even though the implementation would go until the following March. Just seeing the question in the chat. If you cannot fully fund a request, will there be partial amount awarded? If I'm understanding the question correctly, we will just be awarding. We will be looking for fully projects that have all of the funding in place for all of the parts, of which LFPA would be one. That's not to say that you could not apply if there are still some areas that are being lined up of the project, but I would say that a project with funding for all aspects would be more competitive.
Sarah, I see Chief Dunn's hand up. I'm wondering if another way to read that might be if the program is very competitive, would we grant, half the amount requested if we're needing to grant more?
That's a great question. Chief Stevens, thank you for that question. And Julia, thank you for that. That is one that I want to think a little bit about before I give an answer. And Chief Stevens, I'm happy to follow up with you in person with an email. And I have everyone's email who is on the webinar, and I'm also happy to just include everyone in some follow-up answers from the questions today. For the comprehensive funding outline, I think, Carrie, your question about the comprehensive funding, yes. So we would, if there are personnel who are carrying out a project, we would like to see where that staff time is coming from. The depth of detail would not need to be incredibly nuanced, just kind of understanding, and it's really fleshed out in the RFA, kind of what we think of as like a fair ask for things that are not being funded by LFPA plus funding. But who's doing what, when are they doing it, how are they being paid, and by what source? So some eligibility requirements. Eligible applicants for this funding are Vermont farmers, food producers, and ranchers. Socially disadvantaged farmers, producers, and ranchers will be given priority of funding. Again, this is something that in your application, if you are a farmer, food producer, or rancher, you would be self-identifying. This is not a designation that anyone at the agency is making. As well as organizations, both nonprofit and for-profit, with the ability to purchase Vermont food products from socially disadvantaged Vermont farmers, producers, and ranchers, and to distribute them to underserved communities. Eligible costs are food procurement of raw and minimally processed Vermont foods, again with that asterisk for culturally appropriate foods that have prior approval. And projects to be eligible eligible projects must have at least 50% of their total procurement in dollar amount spent purchasing from socially disadvantaged producers, farmers, and ranchers. At least 50% of community members receiving their food, which we quantify in number of distribution sites. So if you have 4 sites, at least 2 of them serve underserved communities, meet the criteria for underserved, and projects must not have a subscription or a barrier to entry. They can have a sign-up sheet or an enrollment, just, people need to know how many folks are signed up for a share, as an example. But there can't be, they can't have to attend a nutrition class to access that share, or can't have to pay to access that share. And projects that are eligible will not transform or process food between procurement and distribution. The USDA is very adamant that foods be procured and then distributed to the end user in the same state. So this is not to say that you couldn't, for example, buy apples and then have apples be distributed alongside something in the same form, but it's to say that you couldn't buy apples to have someone make applesauce and then distribute the applesauce to the end user. And we appreciate that this is incredibly limiting in a lot of ways for food procurement and food access. And that feedback has definitely been given to the USDA. Some examples for eligible projects. All of these examples that are eligible meet all of those four requirements that I just stated. So a farm purchasing product from themselves to start or expand a free seasonal year-round CSA share for underserved community members would be eligible. A farm purchasing a product from themselves to directly donate to a food access site in their community. A Vermont nonprofit procuring food from local farms and or producers to directly distribute to food access sites in their community. Food procurement to support an organization expanding a weekly CSA distribution, and food procurement to support a hospital expanding a healthcare share. Again, these are examples. They are no more or less competitive than other eligible examples, but we appreciate that it's helpful to give some templates, if you will, for how this funding can work. Ineligible projects would be projects that do not purchase food from a majority of socially disadvantaged farmers, producers, and ranchers, that do not serve a majority of underserved community members, that require formal subscription, or that require transformation of the food between procurement and distribution to the end user. All right.
Sarah, I
So,
might interrupt you again. I
yeah,
apologize. Just so that
no.
these don't get lost in the chat. A question: are farmers eligible for more than one grant, working lands, etc.?
That's a great question as well. As far as I understand, Working Lands is state funded other than the ARPA funded primary producer grant. So grantees are eligible to have a federally funded and a state funded grant in the same fiscal year. So I am, maybe Julia, if you have clarification on this, I would say probably not LFPA and the ARPA funded primary producer grant at the same time. But all of the state funded working lands grants, you would be eligible to apply also for LFPA plus.
Yes, I think if you're interested in the Working Lands ARPA and LFPA, reach out to either Sarah or the ARPA program manager just to confirm. I think the one other piece is that you would not be eligible to receive grants for the same project costs. It could be different parts of the same larger project, but you would need to be very clear in your applications that they're kind of different aspects of a project or really different projects, just so that there's not any confusion over the overlap. And then we would also, of course, really want you to be aware of the various reporting requirements for each of the grants, and just be sure that you have full understanding of the technicalities of each grant, the reporting needs, so that you ensure you have enough staff time to complete parallel grants successfully. And then one more, Sarah, to clarify, the cost of the distribution directly to the food access sites is not allowed.
Yes, so cost of distribution directly to the food access sites. The USDA is viewing food procurement funds as the price that you are paying for that product. There is the ability to add a reasonable and small amount of when we pay for food, we are obviously paying for the food, but we are also paying for the labor costs and the packaging costs and the transportation. And that's the way that that the USDA is kind of allowing folks to incorporate, storage and distribution costs of that food into these funds. I would encourage folks to approach that as if we were to make a reasonable estimation of how much we're spending on distribution and add that into our, how much we're going to pay for food that we are procuring, you could increase it in the invoicing, but your allowable costs must only appear as invoices for food procured. And it's something that we have intentionally tried not to, talk about in the PowerPoint, because as I can see everyone's faces, it's coming out of my mouth and it's very confusing. And so the short answer and the simple answer is no, that it would just be the straight food procurement. That being said, I will say that when we pay for food, we are also paying for the other costs that go into producing, storing, and distributing that food. And it makes sense that those would be added into a price that's being paid for food that would show up on an invoice. And folks can reach out to me if they have more questions about that. Again, I apologize for the USDA nuances of this program. And I appreciate your patience and grace as we're navigating them together. But just making sure I'm not skipping a slide here. All right, we'll go back to that slide that I just skipped. But so now we've talked about the eligibility. There's far more information about the eligibility specifications and project requirements in the RFA, which we will go to later. I don't want folks to think that I'm just jumping over the heart of their application process, but for funding and reporting on this slide here. So when will you get the funds, and what happens when you have the funds throughout that period of implementation? For projects that are awarded, again, we'll be writing grant agreements in February and March of 2024. When grant agreements are signed, folks can start spending against the grant and will shortly receive the first payment and can place their first claim for 45% of their total award. That's an upfront payment that you can, again, place the claim for as soon as you've signed your grant agreement. LFPA Plus has quarterly reporting. So this leftmost column here, the 15th of April, July, October, and then January, and then April again. Those are when your quarter reports will be due. They will cover the period that each of them is about a 3-month period that ends 2 weeks prior to the due date. So for the October 15th report, that period runs up until September 30th, and then you have 2 weeks to complete your report and submit it. The reports that you see here starting on April 15th that are in black font are reported via email, just a narrative and then a food procurement template, which we'll return to. The reports that are in red, October 15th and April 15th, are reported through web grants and are a little bit of a more involved process, because those reports are covering both the quarter you're in as well as the progress of your total project up until that point in time. So the middle of the project on the 15th of October, and then the end of the project on April 15th, 2025. They're also in web grants because they are tied to your second and third claims. After you complete your second claim on October 15th, 2024, you can then receive 45% more of your award. And then the final 10% of your award will be received after completion of your project. So folks will need to pay for 10% of their award up front. On the right side of the slide, you'll see each quarter will have a narrative section, which when you are sending a quarter report via email will just be a Word document with the questions, and then the procurement and distribution sheet, which I'll show you in a second. And then again, those interim and final reports will have more longer time scale impact questions with some metrics, and then we'll ask for up-to-date budgets, which, given that there's one category of cost, shouldn't be that hard for this grant. And then going backwards a little bit. So these are just snapshots of what that procurement and distribution sheet will look like. And I apologize that I know the print is a little bit small depending on your computer. Just basically two ends of the same process. You will fill this out on the top table. Who are you procuring from? What is their socially disadvantaged designation? Again, we leave that up to grantees and up to the farms they're working with to figure out that designation status. And what are you purchasing from where and what's the value? And then the second photo will show the other side of that. The grantee just would be the one organizing, distributing of food. What quarter are we in? And where's the food being distributed? What value is being distributed? And then just some more information about where is it being distributed. And this is a way that we as the grant managers can make sure that costs are aligning, that what you procure, the value of what you procure is the value of what's being distributed. And it also is a part of our reporting requirement to the USDA. So this is a USDA form that we will then compile a master sheet every quarter and submit to the USDA. Folks have done it in different ways, but as long as these categories are all being filled out accurately, there again is wiggle room for how it can best fit your own systems for tracking that data.
There, we have a question of who is the vendor on that Excel sheet.
Yes. The vendor would be the organization that is the grantee. So if it was a producer, the vendor would be the producer. If it was a nonprofit that distributes, it would be the nonprofit that distributes, which I appreciate could be a little bit more of a nuanced way to answer yes, no for that question. But we, again, leave that up to each of the grantees to make that determination when provided the definitions. All right. So application components, there are 4 components to the application that must all be addressed for an application to be complete. Applicant information, project description and narrative, budget, and timeline. And over here in the orange, these are the exact criteria, and you can find these in the RFA that will be given to the reviewers. So we really want to be very transparent about this process. Like this is exactly what the reviewers will be looking at when they are looking at applications to consider, project readiness, how do they align with the spirit of the funding, and do they feel actionable and like they make sense. So we really encourage folks to look at both the eligibility requirements and these criteria for review as really good guideposts to creating a strong application. An application timeline. Please review the RFA. There's so much information in the RFA. All of the questions you will find in the application, word for word, should be in that RFA. If you have not already and you're going to apply, please register in Web Grants. Web Grants takes a couple of business days to process, and you will not be able to start an application until it has been processed. Also, if you have not already received a UEI for a previous federal grant opportunity, please apply now if you were planning on applying. UEI is a unique entity identifier. They're required for most federal grants, and the process can take from 1 week to a couple of weeks to be awarded one. So please apply now. And there are links on the website, Vermont Agency of Agriculture website, where folks can get support in how to do that. It is not, I will say it's not the most straightforward process, but I will also respond to everyone's email who is in this webinar. And on this slide, there are a couple of live links that will take you to those resources as well. Again, applications must be completed between October 30th and December 12th by 2 p.m. About a week before the deadline, I will send out a reminder to any applications that are in progress but not submitted. Please make sure that you fully submit your applications and receive a confirmation from Web Grants. Anything submitted after 2 p.m. on December 12th cannot be considered. So we would hate for someone to think that their application is submitted and realize after the fact that it's not. And then again, February 2024, notice of award, and then we'll get into the grant agreement creation and signing process. 3 pieces of information you will need for that. An up-to-date W-9, the UEI, and a certificate of insurance. Also in the RFA, you can read more about each of these specific requirements and also reach out if you have any questions. The UEI, again, it can be satisfactory for your application to be submitted while you have not received one, but one's processing, but we cannot process a grant agreement without a UEI. So please sign up now. I feel like I need a little banner for folks for that one. And then implementation will begin hopefully for everyone by March of 2024. And I think now what I will do, for the sake of time, because I want folks to have time to ask questions, is Julia, I might hand it over to you to do a quick web grants, share your screen and do a quick intro to web grants for folks who haven't used it before. And then we can open it up. And I'm happy to stay a little bit after 3 p.m. as well if folks have questions that they feel weren't answered.
Sarah, sounds great. As I'm sharing my screen, we have a question. I'm just beginning to understand. I'm a producer. To apply, do I need to identify a business that would be purchasing our products?
The answer is not 100% yes, but what I will say is I think both for a producer who's applying and for an organization that's applying, the most complete applications will have both a mechanism that they want to utilize to distribute food, i.e., I'm a farmer and I can, pay myself to distribute this much produce every week, and a way that that is going to be distributed. So for producers, the most competitive projects will have figured out who will be distributing how and when. And for organizations that are applying, they will have figured out what they are buying and from who. That is not necessary, you'll see in the RFA that there are questions that say, if you have not already figured this out, how will you? So that is not a grounds for being ineligible, but I will say that having figured out all the steps to the process in your pathway from procurement to end user distribution will make your project more competitive.
Maybe I'll also just add on, Sarah, that if you are a producer, growing food or producing the product, you would be receiving LFPA dollars to fund, like for LFPA to purchase that product, and then likely you would be donating that to a food shelf or to a community organization or a CSA that goes to healthcare programs or what have you. If you are looking to utilize this to sell the product, then the LFPA, it would make sense for the purchaser to apply to LFPA and get the funds to purchase the product from you. Because it would be double counting income if you got money for the carrots from LFPA and then also sold them. So it's not necessarily somebody buying from you, but somewhere that's receiving the food to give to underserved community members. Great. I'll do web grants very quickly. Good. I put the web grants link. So web grants is our online portal where you apply to grants. It's all of our back end tracking. And as Sarah mentioned, where you will be submitting those kind of bigger interim and final reports. If you have ever applied to a grant at the agency, you probably have a login or somebody in your organization does. We encourage you to check to see that just so you don't have extra logins. You can click on this yellow button, click here to register if you've never used web grants. I'm going to log in with our tester account. It'll look a tiny bit different. So once you log in, it takes a few days to get the registration set. That's just so we kind of make sure you didn't already have one and you accidentally created a second one. This is the basic dashboard that you'll see. You'll want to go over here to funding opportunities. And again, this looks a little bit different. On Monday, the LFPA one will have a green posted signs. That means it's open for folks to see. So you go in and find LFPA and click on that. And then it's super basic details. The RFA link is down here. Once you're ready, you want to go over here to start new application. And it's going to take you through a bunch of screens. So you're going to start with your title and put that in. This is the weird thing. You have to hit the save green button a few different times. I don't know why. Then it kind of gets you to maybe your home page of your application. And so there are these aspects. There's general information, a global application form, and then kind of the heart of LFPA, the application, the budget, and the timeline. And so you'll see if you've completed them, you'll get a little check mark here. Once you go through these all, the parts will have green check marks here. That does not mean it's submitted. You have to go through an extra step to click submit, and you should get a confirmation. I won't take the time to go through all of these, but I'll just click into the application to show you what each looks like. The questions are kind of over here, and we hope it's self-explanatory as you go through. There's a little bit of explanation, the question, and then an area to submit the information. So there's different sections kind of with this yellow background. Project information, you'd put in how much money you're looking for, a start and an end date. And then here you can see questions and their character count. You can grab the lower right and expand just to give yourself some writing room. I recommend it's somewhat helpful if you copy and paste these into a Word document and wordsmith in the Word document, and then just kind of copy and paste once you're done. As you go through, you have to hit this green save form. So you can work on it a little bit, save it, come back a few days later, but just make sure that you're saving all the forms. You have to kind of save each form and then save each section and then complete it at the very end. So there's lots of buttons to click through. And then if you want to go back, you can click on the back. And then you can see up here is a little bit of a kind of list of the pieces that need to be done. Go through again for each part and click save. Gonna stop sharing. We're really happy to help support with web grants. It's a little bit clunky, especially the first time using. Please note that the contact that you list on kind of one of the first pages, that's going to be our main contact for asking any clarifying questions, for notifying of a decision. So just to be cognizant of having that contact be the right person or adding on additional ones. Turn it back over to Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. I appreciate folks, I apologize we lost some time at the beginning with the slide kerfuffle, but we do still have about 10 minutes for questions. I think Julia may have to hop off right at 3, but I'm happy to stay. I'm also happy to have one-on-one conversations with folks. I'll drop my contact information in the chat, and it is also on our LFPA website through the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. But happy to open up the floor to any questions folks might have. I appreciate there's a lot of nuance to this opportunity.
I'll also just note I'll keep the recording going in case it's helpful for folks that want to watch it afterwards. So if you have any really delicate questions that you'd rather not have recorded, please reach out to us individually.
Thanks, Julia. Go ahead, Megan. Do I have to allow everyone to speak?
I got it. Did that work?
Yeah.
Thank you for all of this. I guess I have a couple questions. We're a really small nonprofit. It's just me. I'm the only staff person. I'm supposed to be part-time, but I'm full-time like lots of people are. And the application and having to register with all these places and everything honestly feels a little daunting. So I'm wondering, overall, I'm wondering if it's worth it or if it's so daunting. Are some of us as really small nonprofits going to be kind of left behind because there's so much that has to be done, even in terms of applying originally, and then the reporting, so all of that. That's one of my questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would say that in terms of competitiveness of an application, saying there has been you have applied and everything has gone through, that LFPA, and you can on our website see current grantees, we really have an incredible breadth of scale and scope and who folks are working with. So I don't want the size of your organization to feel like it's makes you any less competitive. We really are looking for impact, like relative to your community and who you work with. Um, I really appreciate the very honest feedback that this is a lot. And I am happy, and Julia is happy, and Kira Ebling is another one of our colleagues on the team. Like, we are happy to make sure that that is as little of a barrier as possible. Where we can be helpful is in the logistical support. When it starts getting into the arena of supporting a specific project being formulated or giving answers around that, we can't really
Right.
help. But logistical support is something we are happy to navigate with folks to make sure that this feels like an accessible opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Because we're a small nonprofit. We get food to seniors who are underserved, and we have this new program that we've done for a couple of years called Diverse Pantry, and we're purchasing from African farmers and getting food to these underserved populations. So it seems perfect. I mean, and we ran out of money this year to do it. Couldn't do the last couple of years of the harvest even. So it seems like it would be a really good fit. And I'm not concerned about writing the project up or anything like that, but it's just the tech side of it. And then needing to register for all this ahead of time and everything. And so thank you for all of that feedback and the knowing that there would be help. And then the other question I had was, in terms of registering for the UEI, is that somewhere obvious on the Department of Ag website?
So that
Sorry, I put the link in the chat.
Oh,
Sorry
great.
to interrupt you. I'll put
No.
it in again, Megan, and we can,
Okay.
it's a little daunting, so we can also do our best to support that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
The UEIs are federal funding is unique in many ways, is what I'm learning.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chief Stevens.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly respond to Megan. This is Chief Stevens with Abenaki Help in Abenaki. We've actually done similar things. We've partnered with people like when we want to help El Nu, which is a tribe who's really small that don't have the infrastructure. We've actually partnered with them through like health grants and other things because we have it. There might be another option for you to speak with Julia and maybe Sarah, where your project might be able to be incorporated with another person's that it would help. I'm not suggesting that would work, but I'm just saying is I would think if your needs are getting met and it's just the technical problems that you're having, that might be a possibility. I also wanted to say I've been involved with this project, so it's a wonderful project. And I just want to say that you guys have been wonderful and great. And I do encourage people like Betty or is it Beatty? To get your name, if you are a producer, get that information to Julia and Sarah so we can purchase from you. People who are granted or these funds, even if you're not granted, we can purchase if you're socially disadvantaged or not. You have to remember only 50% of the food has to be purchased from a non-disadvantaged or socially disadvantaged population. So there's still room to purchase other products. So I don't mean to steal your thunder. I just wanted to say that you guys have been awesome and wonderful to work with, and our people have really been helped. And I'm just seeing other ways that if people are nervous about this, they can still participate potentially. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry.
No,
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief Stevens. I appreciate that. And that I appreciate you saying that, because I will say, we say who's an eligible applicant, and I think that can be maybe a little bit misleading, because those are folks who can apply to be awarded, but we are looking at projects, and projects can have multiple partners who are moving parts within that project. So I also want to say that, and I appreciate the space for that clarification that, you do not have to be going alone in your application. Obviously only one person will do the applying, whether it's a producer or one nonprofit over another, but projects are welcome to have multiple aspects to them. I think, Julie, are there the chat is moving and I just want to make sure I'm not missing any questions.
Yes, there's another question from Bet, who asked about the purchasing. So I would locate a buyer and come to an agreement with them to purchase our product, then apply. And maybe Sarah, if you can answer, and of course, always connect with folks individually on their specifics to help kind of work through what could make sense to be eligible.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I'm pulling from it, examples that we've had of structures from previous grantees, we've had folks who are producers who have applied without a partner organization who are kind of running their own CSA, and that's the only way we've really seen that happen. Or we've had folks, that's the only way we've seen that happen without a partner organization. And we have had folks who have then purchased product from themselves and have, outlined and budgeted how much of that product they're going to be donating on what timeline, and then have said who it will be going to and describing the impact that will have. Those folks have applied with an understanding of who will be receiving that produce. And in that way, I would say if that doesn't feel, we appreciate this might not be the best fit for everyone. I will also say folks who are producers are welcome to be added to the farmer interest list. That is not a guarantee of, purchasing agreements to come out of that. And I appreciate that. But, folks who are current grantees have really appreciated that opportunity. And we've heard that folks are still working to find folks to work with, to buy from. And I will also come back to if this feels like a good fit for your program, for your, if you're a producer, then perhaps there are organizations who would be interested in, maybe they apply, but you have an agreement that they'll be buying from you. And so I think there's a lot of ways this could work for a producer. I appreciate that, purchasing agreements and understanding where the income is going to come from is very important. But in terms of project competitiveness, like, yes, for us to see, like the fully fleshed out goals of how that will be distributed or donated is best. I bet I will reach out to you. I have your email afterwards and I can confirm whether or not you're on the list. And if not, I'll send you the link to apply or to add yourself to the list. Folks have any other questions?
Yes, Sarah, we have a question about what are the age parameters for being a socially disadvantaged farmer? And I can pop the definition in.
Yeah, these are such great questions. You can never be prepared for such great questions, but there is no number associated with age. And we just ask folks to use what feels like a straightforward, we give folks this definition in good confidence that they are using a straightforward and fair interpretation of that. If folks feel comfortable, I would say, giving a justification of why you selected an age, if it feels like, it could be less clear to someone else why you feel like that you justified that would be helpful to add, but we do really give folks the definition and have good faith that they're going to utilize it fairly.
Great. Lots of questions about the list. A farmer doesn't necessarily have to be on your list.
Have to be on the farmer interest list?
Yes.
No, not at all. We have over 90 producers, farmers, ranchers, which is, a mouthful for me to say, but they really want folks to think of beyond just like a producer or a meat producer. You know, we have folks who are working with apiarists to produce honey, who are working with orchards for pasteurized cider. They don't at all have to be on that list.
Another question. So is the funding only for the food procurement, but not a subcontractor who delivers gas payment, et cetera?
Correct. It is only for the food procurement.
And we can get a copy of that list out to folks. I'll put some directions in the chat. Again, it's not an endorsement, it's not a promise, it's just a starting place. And again, folks can self-certify if they do or do not meet the definition or prefer not to answer.
Yeah, and I will just also add that, you know, that list was originally circulated in 2020, late 2022. We recirculate it pretty frequently for additions, but I'm not sure that we ask folks if they want to be taken off the list. And I will say that it went out obviously pre-flooding, and I'm just going to name that there are probably some producers whose decision may have changed for them since then. So they may have said yes, but may say no now. Well, thanks folks for waiting through that with me. I appreciate it. Maybe if we're lucky, we can shorten the recording for everyone else so they can't see my 5 screens. But please, please, please reach out if you have any questions. I'm very happy to talk to folks one-on-one via phone or email. It's not lost on me how nuanced this is, and we really want folks to feel like it's accessible. We know there's no shortage of wonderful projects that could come from this in the state. So yeah.
Thank you so much. It was really, really helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.